to the kickoff of IconX Insights podcast. Super excited to have you guys tune in and listen to iconic guests and really iconic conversations. Today, I couldn't be more excited for our inaugural episode to feature the one and only Bill Kleyman. Bill's currently the CEO and founder of Apollo AI and executive chair of AFCOM data center programs. So little context, Bill and I recorded this months ago, but the interesting part of this is we were talking about things that hadn't quite happened, but we felt were coming up, and now all of those are coming true. So I thought it was really appropriate to broadcast this, and if you get a chance, listen to all the way through. You're going to learn a lot of things about Bill himself, and some really interesting conversations about where our industry was, is, and is going. Thanks so much for listening and tuning in. And don't forget, be iconic. So we're going to talk about data centers and AI and how AI is affecting everything we're doing today, right? It's the topic of every panel discussion I've been on lately. Most conferences are really focused on this. But I think, we're going to put a little twist on it today with some of our discussion points. So thanks again for being here. Mm-hmm. So let's jump right in. You've seen the data center industry evolve over the years. Why is now different time for AI and data centers?
There's so much, everyone. We live in a world that's just discovered oil, but hasn't invented the internal combustion engine. That's what it feels like, right? There's just so much raw material, and we don't necessarily know what to do with it. But we as human beings are looking at this viscous black material, and we're like, this is going to be really important. We don't know how quite yet, but we know this is going to be really important. And much to the human condition, the first thing that we like to do when we find out something new is we like to, set it on fire. Now, it's a very, very joke, right? But in the case of this entire era that we're seeing right now in terms of ChatGPT, that's the equivalent of lighting it on fire. It's ChatGPT everywhere. That's our first introduction. But obviously, there's so much more. Chrissy, you mentioned something earlier in the introduction. I actually took a note of it. I've been in this space for just north of 20 years. I have my undergraduate, that's the one degree you didn't mention, Chrissy, shame on you, network engineering. And I graduated with that in 2005. And I'm really fortunate. There's a term for folks that are in my age group. They're called geriatric millennials. I don't know why, who thought of that.
Be careful, you're younger than I am.
Well, you absolutely always look lovely, especially when I take my selfies with you. You make everyone look great. But I've been in this industry for just north of 20 years. And just to answer your question a little bit, I've seen more happen in the last 24 months than I have in the last 2 decades. And it's been a whirlwind. And the one thing, and we're going to talk about this whole oil analogy, discovering it, inventing the internal combustion engine. We'll come back to it. I just kind of want everyone to understand that this isn't a tech cycle. This is not a tech cycle. It's much more akin to an infrastructure renaissance. That's what we're experiencing, because the biggest change, and when we start to, AI has been with us for a long time. Everyone, you know that, right? You've gone on your favorite search engine, you've started typing something, it autofills it. That's a version of machine learning, right? That's been around us with decades. But AI, today's AI, it's not incremental, it's exponential. And that is really important to understand. And unlike this cloud era, which I'm sure we have some battle scars from and we remember it, which optimized for scale and flexibility, AI demands performance at every single layer for it to work properly, from silicon to cooling. We see things like generative AI models like DeepSeek and Gemini and Bard and Claude driving workloads that are 10 times to 100 times more compute hungry than ever before. And we're seeing like these forecasts, like I think it was in our notes, Goldman Sachs mentioned that there's going to be a 165% increase in power, data center power by 2030. And honestly, that's conservative, where estimates right now are we as an industry consume 2.5-3%, right, of energy. And that's going to grow just in the United States to 7.5 to 8% of all energy consumed, upwards of 40 to 45 gigawatts of power. Now, I'm gonna pause here so we can ask the next question here. So what does that ultimately mean for us as an industry? It's an extraordinary metric. We are seeing a total redesign of digital infrastructure. And what I want everyone on this call, yes, we're going to be talking about some really cool numbers, really fast. Grab a golden nugget, take anything away, because my fundamental statement here is that every data center is going to become an AI data center. It all depends on how quickly you can fundamentally get there. And when we start talking about these gigawatts, it feels like you're not even getting out of bed these days unless it's under a gigawatt or more of power. But this number, 1 gigawatt, and you might be hearing me saying this again, and your immediate reference is Back to the Future. It's like 1.21 gigawatts will take me to the future, right? That's so much that lightning produced. 1 gigawatt will power a city of 1 million people. 10 gigawatts is enough for Los Angeles or New York, and 100 gigawatts of power. 100 gigawatts of power is about 10% of all of the lights that are currently on in the entire world. So when I was up on stage at Data Center World, and we had Kevin O'Leary get up there on a Thursday in front of several thousand people, and he's like, "I'm building an 8 gigawatt facility off grid in Alberta, Canada. 8 gigawatts." To me, this guy is planning a power architecture that's enough for a Los Angeles or a New York City.
That's crazy.
It's extraordinary.
It's amazing. And what it's going to take to do that could be a whole nother podcast.
Chrissy, first of all, you're right. And there's a really great panel. Before we're talking, I'm reviewing all of the sessions for Data Center World Power happening in September. And I'll remind you to go to this thing again. And oh my goodness, if we're talking about data center renaissance, we're about to have a power architecture renaissance with off-grid power site design, with natural gas turbines. Look at what happened with Meta and these nuclear deals right down the street. I'm in Illinois, everyone, from Constellation Energy. I think Meta bought all of their power for the next 20 years. It's just extraordinary.
It's insanity. Well, and all of this is going to change how we build data centers. I was just on a panel earlier this week about that. And we have to change our mindset about everything from the design, the structure, besides the power, also just how it's going to affect lead times and the supply chain. And so it's very interesting.
Look, a natural gas turbine, like 5-6 years to get this. A generator, 3 to 4 years, like one of those big ones, like a legit generator for an infrastructure facility. But you nailed it, right? It's a complete redesign. Heck, I have a single day conference here in the state of Illinois on concrete, and the guys like Bill, I know it's a boring topic, but of all the people, who can make concrete, I look straight at him like, are you kidding me? This is literally the foundation, and you can't pour this stuff down unless you know what the weight specifications are of this new kind of architecture. This dude just stares at me. He's like, you're right, but do other people realize? I'm like, yes, they do, right? These tiles in a raised floor architecture, if your facility is running at 1,500, 2,000 pounds per square foot, you are in trouble because those racks are crazy heavy. My partner, Scott Data Center in Omaha, 5,000 pounds per square foot. That's extraordinary.
And if you go to liquid cooling, water's heavy. That changes everything, right? So another segue. All right, back on track. So how is AI's role shaping perspective? So, you mentioned the idea of in our previous conversations about reconditioning the human mind. How is AI challenging our traditional ways of thinking about data centers? We touch on this a little bit, operators, and just the broader public. Because, a lot of it is the community see these things as, they're going to impact everything, our power, our grid, they're going to make noise, they're going to, take up space, but they're also going to produce jobs too. So there's a lot of community input and perception. So how do we recondition the human mind in thinking about these AI data centers and AI in general?
There's there's two pillars to this answer, and everyone follow along here if you can, because I want to make sure we talk about this from a physical infrastructure perspective. And Chrissy, I want to answer your question from a true human perspective.
Perfect.
One of the things that earlier you mentioned, I am the CEO of Apollo, and in this very brief definition, an AI and infrastructure company, we're unique because Apollo, this is the only, we'll talk about it later, we're a factory floor, and Apollo in itself was designed for data centers and telcos to be able to create a white label multi-tenant solution to then serve up to their enterprise clients. So we are a unique position where we see both the infrastructure that's required, but also these workloads that are running on top. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we sort of discuss this. Look, there's no question. We're having a moment. The data center industry is having a moment, right? In the sense that people know about us. We're seeing a necessary mental shift in how we perceive and prioritize data center infrastructure, because historically data centers were invisible. They were, right, even when I started, right, they were even called like data centers. They're like network rooms and data closets, and they were out, right into nondescript buildings, out of sight, out of mind.
Usually a closet that held a couple other things, including a mop bucket.
Including a mop bucket. That will never get old, because many seasons and years we have seen the mop bucket. But AI, especially today's AI, is making us very, very visible. It's making some people uncomfortable. We're going to have to be comfortable with that. These aren't buildings anymore. They're energy-intensive, high-tech factories where communities are, like you said, demanding answers about water usage, carbon footprint, noise pollution. I mean, when we start talking about how global data centers are going to consume upwards of 460 terawatt hours of electricity, doubling that by 2026, as a matter of fact, how do we ultimately meet this demand? And there's all these acronyms. There's what's it called? NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. I learned a new one recently called NOTE, not over there either, that's too extreme. So let's talk about this repositioning. First of all, in the public spectrum, look, South Park did an episode on generative AI. It was called Deep Learning, and I don't ever recommend South Park in a professional setting, right? Or on a data center world stage, no less. But this episode was kind of scary, interesting. I actually recommend anyone who's interested to watch it, because when generative AI takes over, and it's scary, and it's good, and it's scary, and it's really good.
So a lot of laymen, not industry, people who are familiar with it or even use it every day, it makes people nervous.
It does a little bit, right? And we'll talk about how I think, we as humans, whenever something new comes out like this, it's scary for us because it's new. But we're deviating a little bit. I'm trying to make sure I answer your question in those two pillars that I mentioned earlier.
I'll keep you on track.
You are awesome. From a physical infrastructure perspective, we're not an unknown anymore. We're not, right? Kevin O'Leary and a bunch of these other folks are basically flat out saying that if you're not investing in data centers and real estate, you're completely missing this boat. At Data Center World this year, 70% year-over-year increase in attendees and 74% year-over-year increase in exhibitors, with about 200 of them completely net new doorknobs for data centers. They had a booth. Doorknobs, right? Why not, right? And many of those people were real estate investment folks, individuals that just desperately want to become a part of this business to learn more. We're mainstream. There's no question about that. We're mainstream. We're known, and there's going to be a lot of work on our plates to make sure that we are a part of these communities. Truly a part of them, right? And there's ways, there's means and metrics that you can do this. And going back to one of our critical partners in Omaha, Nebraska, so Scott Data Center, they literally partnered with University of Nebraska Omaha, and they opened up an engineering division within their facility, right? And so now they take electrical, mechanical, computer science majors, say, come on, work in a data center. And then they take some of the top ones, they're called Scott Scholars, and they're like, if you do a really great job, we're gonna get you a job in the data center industry. And it's a beautiful flow from the university system to get this young talent into our environment. Look, Compass, I know my former employer switched with UNLV, many other individuals. We're trying to get more folks into the industry, and you start young to change the perception of who we are, what we're doing, the impacts that we're making. But because we're mainstream, we're now known, we have to make that voice very loud across the board. Now, let's talk about the human element here. So pause on that. We've got work to do. We're in the mainstream. Insert your favorite news channel here. We're being talked about. There's Congress, Capitol Hill conversations about us. Great. Now, why is this happening at such an extraordinary scale and pace? And let's just briefly talk about this. AI, like we said earlier, has been around for a very long time. It has been, right? The changes of what's happening right now is what we need to fundamentally understand. So in the past, Chrissy Olson would want to ask a question, right? She'd go to her favorite search engine. It could be Alta Vista. It could be Ask Jeeves. If she's feeling extra feisty, maybe she'll even go on Google and Bing. And just kind of side note, I did that bit at a high school recently, and I had like blank stares. The kids were like, Ask Jeeves?
Ask Jeeves.
Is this guy asking his butler for information? What is this about? Then I never do that again to young people. But what's fascinating about that, right, is over the course, September of 1998 was the first time we could ask Google a question. And since then, you and I have been conditioned to interact with data in a very specific manner.
Every day.
Every day, Chrissy asks a question and you get a blue link back. That's what it's been like since September, almost 30 years practically. That's how we've been communicating with it. And God forbid you end up on page 2 of Google. You're lost. At this point, you're questioning your life.
You've gone down the wormhole.
That's it. That you're in Mordor. Just throw the ring in the fire and leave there, Frodo. That's how far you've gone down the rabbit hole. But what's fascinating about that statement is that almost overnight, if you go on Google and Bing right now and you ask a question, it's no longer a blue link. It's a generative AI response, then followed by the blue links. The way we interact with data and ask it questions has completely changed, where we get a conscious, I'm using that very carefully. If you're not watching me use air quotes, I'm not talking Skynet here, but these conscious, unique responses to our inquiries is a fundamental paradigm shift for us in terms of how we've been conditioned to interact with data. So those two pillars, there's a renaissance happening in physical infrastructure, how it's designed, how we're being perceived, but that's being fueled by this mental shift in humanity across the board in how we work, interact, and ask questions of information. And in a room of over, it was like 3,000 people, I asked, how many people here have used ChatGPT? Don't be shy. And my gosh, Chrissy, if not more than 90% of that room raised their hands. And if I would have asked the question, how many of you have used generative AI? In reality, if you've gone on a search engine, every single person,
you're using it.
That's it. And that's something I'll say 100% of the people listening to this podcast, if you've gone and searched for anything, whether it's on your phone, on Bing or on Google, you use Gemini, you've used you've used OpenAI, you've used generative AI. Congratulations. You're part of this era.
Yeah. Well, and I think like there's different ones that we use for different things. I have 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. I won't mention them. That's but okay. And it's just even how you ask or prompt whatever you're looking for will make a difference in the answer that you get back.
Indeed.
Which is going to change the way we talk to data. We use our phones. We use search engines. It's going to change everything, which is scary for a lot of people.
You mentioned something like a key word on Congress. At a congressional hearing recently, a senior executive of Apple, they asked, about search engines. And for the first time since Google has been on the Apple platform, they saw search traffic drop for the first time ever. Google search, because of Search GPT and ChatGPT. The way we ask questions has shifted so much that we're seeing impactful trends on other types of search. Now, obviously, Google came out and said, wait, this is not entirely true. There's some caveats to this. But that I think that the nail's been struck where we have to think about how we interact with data. Is Google getting old, right? And how are the folks like that going to shift to be able to support this new paradigm shift that we're talking about?
Well, and so let's talk a little bit about transparency to the communities when we talk about building an AI data center. Besides the size, right? Besides the structural requirements and the infrastructure requirements, what are you seeing that communities and cities and just people in general are concerned with? Not so much the smoke and mirrors of AI, but when they're, a big facility is being built in their backyard, for lack of a better term.
It's pretty common. I remember attending a conference in Virginia recently. I think it was maybe a couple of years ago. Recently, that's not recently. That's ages ago, right? 2 years. And I remember encountering protesters, right? Real life protesters holding signs and everything. And me being gregarious and I like people, I engage them. I'm like, just what's your concern? And ultimately, that engagement ended up with let's call it a debate panel, right, at one of the DCD events. And I was on there, and it was, Chrissy, I'll be honest with you, one of those few times where I had like an iPad full of notes because I knew what was going to be discussed. And it was, and I don't have the notes in front of me, but impacts on the watershed, height, impacts on local wildlife and greenery, power impacts, taxes. Noise, tax incentives, tax impacts, power. How is power going to be drawn? Overhead underneath. All of these kinds of really, or for example, here's another big one. Are you going to be, drilling into the dirt? Is there sediment going to be in the well water because of what you're doing? So like really in-depth questions that we would cover. And what I found in working with folks like Chris Crosby and Nancy Novak, and just looking at what Compass and some of these other folks are doing, I mean, I was well prepared to come into this conversation and have a meaningful discussion on, these buildings aren't being built more than 60 feet. Yeah, there's a battleground that you're concerned about. If there's any situation where it's being blocked, these trees will be planted. And I remember the impact on the watershed was so low that it was less than what a new apartment building that was being built not far away was impacting local watershed than this data center was. And then the noise conversation came up, and like, these facilities operate at 60 decibels, which is a regular sounding conversation. To the extent where there's new facilities being built, which are fanless, right? Complete liquid cooling architecture. That's like the Teslas of the world. They're silent practically, right? You're going to have some fans from servers, but like those big ones that from the crack and the cray units, those are fundamentally changing now, which goes back to our conversation of redesigning the architecture, but we'll get back there. These communities are being vocal in terms of fear, uncertainty, and doubt over something that's new, that's nascent to them, at least, right? The industry's been around for a long time. We're just being noticed. There's not going to be a situation of a note, right? Not over there either. That's impossible. That is an impossible situation because of something known as Jevons paradox. And Jevons paradox states that with efficiency, consumption grows in parallel. With AI, unfortunately, consumption is outgrowing any efficiency that we're trying to put on the table here, which is a bit of a challenge because it's like, even if we're becoming more efficient, that growth is still 2x. But to that extent, that simply means more people are going to be using it. More people are going to be leveraging this to change their lives. There's going to be complaints. There's going to be, challenges. The most successful strategy that I've seen work in this sense is dialogue. Is dialogue clear in the sense of practical application of new sustainability architecture, water conservation, energy utilization? Look, we shot ourselves in the foot by being secretive, by being nondescript facilities that no one knew about, and all of a sudden here we are.
There's a big gray box down the road.
We didn't help ourselves, but it was also by design. We did it on purpose because customers didn't want to know where their data was being held. They wanted us to just go over there and have your blinking lights and go do your thing. And how quickly they became mainstream, and now we have this additional weight of a challenge that we have to describe to the industry our necessity, but also describe to the industry why we want to be like your water tower or your hospital, right? We want to be an integrated part of the community, not just a rogue box in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's a utility, just like anything else, and probably more important than most things people realize. And it's also, I'm seeing, if you look back 10 years at Ashburn, Virginia, there was nothing there, right? It was all farms. And now there are huge community. Every time I go there, there's another community or a subdivision or apartments going up. But look at all what it's brought to that area of the country, right? It's brought infrastructure, it's brought communities, it's brought it's a whole new city, restaurants, etc. So there is a lot of positives that go along with these things as well, that I see. I mean, when I was in Omaha a couple months ago, like that area has grown significantly because of the hyperscales moving in there, right? It's drawing people in there, it's drawing workers in there. So there's a lot of positives about that too. But you're right. I think community collaboration and communication is huge. And I do see a lot of people in the industry, they have a whole division of their company that just does that before they've even broken ground. So I think it's definitely improving that. So let's talk a little bit about how AI is affecting the data center industry by the infrastructure and what it takes to build these, what it takes to design them, and what it takes to operate them once they're built, because it is changing things a lot. So what do you see as the high level real impacts in those areas?
First of all, this is a great question, Chrissy. I stood on stage recently at Data Center World and others as well, and I made an announcement. Right, I feel that you need two things to be successful in the industry: power and bravery. And we are seeing both of those on display. But I'm gonna challenge myself a little bit here and draw a caveat that the real impact isn't just power. It's pressure on the entire supply chain, design philosophy.
You're talking my language.
There we go. Right. Well, AI is reshaping procurement, facility layout, operations, and I'll give you a very specific example. The average AI rack now consumes between 40 and 80 kilowatts, and this is compared to the traditional 5 to 10 kilowatts per rack. In the latest AFCOM State of the Data Center report, which, by the way, here's where you'll see like a little podcast ding go up. If you're curious about the report, send me a DM, or you can send Christy a DM. We'll get that over to you. But I've had the pleasure and the honor of writing this thing for the past 9 years. And when I first wrote the report 9 years ago, the average rack density was 6.1 kW per rack. All right. This year, it was 16 kW per rack, which honestly is not bad, right? We're moving up in that scale. But here's what you need to think about. A single NVIDIA DGX unit, right? That's one of those. It's 6 units. It goes in there. Eight H100 cards in there. One single one consumes 10.2 kilowatts in a rack. So if your entire rack can only do 16, like what are you going to do? 1.5 and a whole bunch of blinking panels? That's not going to be very effective, right? So in an era, in a world that's been so used to deploying what I like to call pizza boxes, sometimes Cisco UCS converged architecture. I grew up in that space. We have to rethink this architecture. And so going back to your visit to Omaha, for example, and speaking at Scott, they were an HPC, they get up to 20 kW, and then they heard me talk and they're like, Bill, we have these clients. They want to go to the cloud, but our infrastructure needs to be supportive of that. Now they've certainly got to that point, but that was a redesign. That was them putting in Motivair rear door heat exchangers. They were fortunate to have those 5,000 pounds per square foot tiles, so they put the water manifolds beautifully right underneath, conserving the overhead space for busways and other things. But they put those Motivair rear door heat exchangers in, and they noticed a massive redesign for their architecture, right? So they had to think about power distribution, cable management, a new perspective of aisle containment, right? They had to think about, where can I get my busways? Are these liquid cooling systems coming in, right? There's a reason why just on infrastructure alone, the AI spend is going to be about $250 billion by 2027, you guys. That's 2 years away from. I'm not talking about everything else that you're going to spend on AI. Just what I just mentioned, the busways, the transformers, just the infrastructure side alone is going to be a massive impact to both CapEx and the way we operate. So like OpEx, for example, the AI wave isn't subtle. It's seismic, right? There's nothing subtle about this. And you hear me being a little bit facetious about this, but it is a true reflective moment of your capability to handle these types of AI workloads, and also to recognize revenue from this AI, which are not at 2 or 3x multiples, but 10 to 100x multiples, simply because of the types of workloads that are going to be run on there. So when you ask the question, the impact on the data center industry, specifically from a design, that's why I call it a renaissance, right? We've reached the limit of how much air can dissipate heat from mechanical equipment. Now, that's not Bill Kleyman coming on this wonderful podcast and saying airflow is going away. That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that that's it. We have to incorporate some type of liquid architecture. And I know the true hardcore liquid engineering, liquid cooling fans are like, Bill, rear door heat exchangers is not real liquid cooling. Fine. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Slap a car radiator on the back of your rack. And if it gets you 6 to 10 times more density, you're still winning. We can argue the semantics all day long, but direct-to-chip liquid cooling, immersion cooling, eventually when it becomes more supported by these heavy GPU chips, but also power infrastructure. We're going to get a little bit of a math lesson. We're going to do some finger graphs here. When you look at a typical CPU chart, the power is like a sine wave, up and down. Beautiful, really nice. You can pretty much measure it all day long. But on a GPU, it's like this, wah, up and down. It goes really crazy. And because of that, your power considerations completely change. Do you have power banks? Can you handle that kind of power load up and down? Right. What happens to your batteries when they get hit by that? So these are entirely new conversations that you have to sort of incorporate when you're designing for the infrastructure. Now, this sounds really scary. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be scary, because even though we are asking some of our systems to do things that they were never designed to do, we have the innovation. We have right now, as we're sitting, as Chrissy and Bill are talking, the technology is there. And even for a legacy traditional colocation to move into the AI era, I've done it. We've done it. My partners have done it quite successfully to now host and support these new types of AI workloads. It's possible. It's all not just possible. Is not it's feasible and economical as well. You have to display that second piece for success, right? Bravery.
All right, I'm going to get us back on track.
Love it.
So you have talked in the past with me about the 3 models of AI. Can you break down what these models are and how they influence our data center strategies?
Yeah, and I think this is a very fluid topic. I don't like to there's acronyms that have their place and there's definitions that have their place, right? I think people will talk about AI in the cloud, AI at the edge, and certainly AI. It's called AI behind the firewall, enterprise AI. But that's one definition of it. But I want to kind of talk about some of the bigger trends of these 3 models, right? There's AI training, right? Then there's AI training. Hang on a second. And then there's AI inference. Okay. And what are those 3 models, right? The first one I said, the AI training. That's the big one. These are the organizations with thousands, tens of thousands of GPUs creating the next foundational model, your next OpenAI, your next Llama, your next Bard, Claude, DeepSeek, etc. Those infrastructure designs are usually single tenant or built to spec, high density, just an absolute ton of these GPUs. Part of the reason why Crusoe and CoreWeave became so incredibly popular, because they're like, crypto miners, what are you? We're an AI company now, right? And so they were able to pivot and shift simply by the manner and luck of having the infrastructure ready to go already. So good for them, right? But they are much. I feel like that business, while important, is a little bit more speculative, right? Because you are still building the model that you will hopefully one day monetize upon, right? So, but that's a completely different scale of architecture. Please understand. Now, then there is model training, AI training. Now, the second one's a little bit more interesting because now this is where a company still requiring a good number of GPUs will take a large language model, bring it inside the organization and retrain it for their specific use cases. So it might be a small language model, a large language model that's a little bit smaller, more concise, and specifically fitting data architecture for the specific organization. Now, they might not necessarily buy their own gear, but this is a good situation where they would maybe go to my company, Apollo, or they would go to another kind of neo cloud and say, I need like 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 GPUs. I've got my own large language model and I got to do this work here. But that also defines a new type of architecture that you have to be able to support this kind of environment. Now, the third one is inference. And this is where I really want everyone to focus on. IDC recently reported that 75% of all AI inferencing is going to be happening outside of those massive data centers. And this is a wake-up call that one architecture does not fit everything, right? And this is where my business model specifically fits in, because we believe that people will want to do valuable AI where their data already lives. So, I mean, going back to my example with Scott Data Center, we have 1,000 GPUs plus or minus, and the goal there is I'm not going to be training large language models. I'm not even like offering that to the enterprise. Do that massive stuff somewhere else. But when you're actually going to do inferencing, the application of those large language models to a real use case, that's where you contact me, and that's where you use my GPU. So I absolutely believe this statement. Right now, 80% of our workloads in this industry are for model training and 20% are for inference. In the next 24 to 36 months, that will flip on its head. It's going to be 80% inference and about 20% model development, because we're going to have to come to a point, Chrissy and everyone listening, that we're going to actually have to use these models that are being developed for real use cases, right? And what we're doing outside of the big hyperscalers, for example, where if you're a bank, if you're a healthcare organization, if you're a research institution, or government or whatever it is, you can't put this stuff on OpenAI or in a public cloud environment. You go to a neo cloud. You go to someone like me who can compartmentalize, privatize, whatever model you want. Not a single bit or a byte will ever leave your cluster. Now, those industries that have been, legal is another good one, have been handcuffed by not being able to use the cloud. Well, they're going to go to their data center partners. They're going to start to apply these use cases in private, much more secure kind of environments. So, when we start to take a look at this future, we're going to have the big model builders, because they're going to make a lot of money building these new foundational models. And then we're going to have that middle part of enterprises still using a ton of GPUs, but now maybe creating their own LLMs built off of those foundational models. And then finally, you're going to have those folks that are doing inferencing, the application of the models into the actual AI use case workloads. That's where that revenue generating conversation comes in. What are you actually using it for? How are you making money? That's that third focus. Now, while they will all require high density compute, while they will all probably require some type of liquid cooling, there will be a basis theory of how you can architect everything similarly. Those are different types of environments for sure.
So do you see, when you look at outside of our immediate industry and you look at healthcare and you look at gaming and you look at all of these things, and they're going to all be adapting AI into their systems, especially healthcare, all the things that you can do around that. Do you see a shift towards a decentralized edge data centers, going more to that on-prem where they're going to own those versus hyperscale, or do you think it'll be something entirely new?
So I think that goes back to my earlier definition of three models, right? So AI in the cloud, big models, right. AI at the edge, smaller, right? But still closer. And then AI behind the firewall, much closer to the actual enterprise where some of that inferencing is happening. I don't believe that companies are going to go out there and buy GPUs and put them inside of their enterprise data centers. This does not make any sense. You're going to want to consume it as
cost effective.
It's not. You're going to want to consume it as an OpEx model. But there's truth, right? So model training, those big foundational models, you can put them anywhere you want. Put them in the middle of Texas, Arkansas, the place where there's plenty of land power. You just need to train them and build them there for long periods of time. But when we start talking about inference or the application of these models, that's when it's best to keep it as close as possible. We have a use case. Cows, facial recognition for cows. There's an agriculture client in Nebraska. Nebraska has a lot of cows. And they used to run their AI and ML visual telemetry models in Amazon. Now, the challenge was that it would take them 2 to 3 weeks to identify if the cow was sick, if it was walking weird, if it was snotty, if it wasn't eating. At that point, a model is useless because your entire herd is going to die, right? Now, they took that training, that inferencing architecture, and they put it in Scott Data Center, much closer to where those cows actually lived. And all of a sudden, Chrissy, that training went from that inferencing went from 2 to 3 weeks down to 1 to 2 hours. So this client came back and they're like, what this is revolutionary. This means that not just in one cattle, but in the entire herd, we can identify a disease and send a vet out there in about an hour to isolate that specific cow and make sure that it's healthy again.
Before it spreads to the whole herd.
Before it spreads. Now, they gave us a number. They're like, you've saved us millions. We don't know how many yet. We'll let you know when we apply this. And here's the kicker. The visual telemetry model is so powerful that they're applying it to potatoes. Which ones are the healthiest? Which ones should go to a steakhouse? Which ones should go to McDonald's, for example, to the extent where they know if a fox hides a golf ball, which apparently they like to do in potato fields, and before a combine comes and picks it up and damages the machine, they know where there's a golf ball so a farmer can come in and get it before the machine runs through it. That is all done through AI and ML, and that's also done as close to where that data is as possible.
That's a great story. So even farming and cattle is moving to AI. Get it? I couldn't help myself.
That's a winner. That's a winner for me.
Oh, all right. I think this is a very interesting question. So there's a lot of debate about whether AI is going to replace jobs and humans or augment them. From a data center perspective, is AI automating roles traditionally held by humans, or is it creating new opportunities for human expertise?
If there's folks on this webinar that have heard me speak before, and obviously we've been together for a few minutes now, you can see that I'm a very energetic, passionate individual, and usually very, very positive. So I am not going to sit here and say, yay, AI is for everyone, love it, or else. But you've seen the headlines.
Yeah.
That there are folks from Microsoft, coders, and other places that are being let go. Workforces the size of 10, 20% are being just eliminated by current AI capabilities doing basic human functions. Will there be jobs that are being replaced? Probably. Now, that's not necessarily what I try and do and build. What I love to do is I love to give people back something that's finite time. That's the goal of the systems that we build. An RFP that takes you 2 days, let's get that down to 10 minutes. Sales processes that results in 20% errors, let's get that down to 3%. So that's the kind of stuff. AI is automating the boring so that humans can focus on the brilliant. That's truly my perspective in this. And in the data centers, we use things for like workload optimization, predictive maintenance, energy efficiency. There's a really interesting study from CBRE that said more than 40% of data center operators are deploying AI for facility management. Now, kind of secret here, we're doing some stuff with our AI Launchpad where we're literally building like solutions for like a data center to consume. So things like certificates of insurance, for example, or building efficiency, or being able to ask questions of your data in the supply chain, where there's efficiency, where there's optimization that you can create this stuff. So there are now actual tools, you're welcome to ask me about them, that isn't stuff you have to create from scratch. There's already availability, but AI in my world isn't removing jobs, it's changing them. And you're going to have to be comfortable with that, because the next generation of data center pros will be part technologist, part data scientist, and part operational strategist. And that is okay. That's going to be an evolution of who we are and what we do. We still need human expertise. We still need designers. We still need electricians and engineers and strategists who can interpret the insights and manage these very, very complex systems. That's not going away. And even with things like agentic AI and artificial general intelligence, where we're getting as close as possible to the decision-making process, in my opinion, people are still involved, especially in this high stake, high touch kind of environment that we build. I think humans are necessary, but there's tools that make that process in the life a lot better.
Well, and I see that as well, right? We're using it to make ourselves more efficient, streamline processes and procedures, and maybe a task that would take hours can be shortened now to minutes, and that helps everybody, as we're all very, especially here in the US, we're very busy. We don't take enough time off. We're very, we're going. If we can use some of these things to enhance our professional, that also enhances our personal, because it gives us back some time.
Agreed.
All right, Bill, let's look into your crystal ball. What does the future hold for AI and the data center industry in the next 5 to 10 years that you see in your crystal ball? And are there game-changing innovations or challenges on the horizon that we should be preparing for?
I was meeting with our investors in Omaha, and we were at a beautiful dinner at the Omaha Country Club, just a building rich in history and just really beautifully designed. And one of our board members looks at me. He's like, "Bill, where do you see this industry in 3 to 5 years?" And I'm like, is that, I thought he was kidding, because like, look at what's happened in the last 10 months. And it's going to be very difficult to predict what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years, but let's try together. We're going to see, we call them digital natives, right? That's a part of when we start getting like the whole YouTube era, all of that stuff. We're going to start to see AI natives, right? AI native cities, regions where data, energy, and policy align to foster AI innovation and growth as a part of humanity. We're going to be seeing facilities that are built around integrated microgrids, heat reuse, because we are building facilities much closer to urban areas, zero water cooling, that's a complete reduction of waste, right? Really highly efficient architecture. We're also going to see heavy investment and in innovation around chip technology. So things like photonic processors, neuromorphic chips, which drastically reduce the amount of power that you require per things like per inference. Because again, I believe that's what the future is going to be: massive inference cycles that we're going to need to make as efficient as possible. But we're going to have some serious bottlenecks. We're going to have some serious challenges, right? We're going to have grid congestion, right? The last major upgrade to the United States electrical grid was like in the 50s and the 60s. We're going to have to think about that. Land use conflicts, that's going to be a big one as well, right? We're running out of space. The vacancy rate in Virginia is 0%. In the United States, it's about 3%, which is horribly nothing, right? It's very little. We're going to experience talent shortages, which is part of the reason why AI is going to help, but we still need more human beings. The operators that are going to win are going to be those who build sustainably, automate aggressively, partner strategically, and believe in what I like to call courageous collaboration, right? Where you exhibit this power and bravery that I talked about. I love thinking that AI isn't just about compute; it's about capability, right? And your capability to approach the market. It's going to be an extraordinary future of us becoming more integrated with artificial intelligence as a native part, not just of work, but our lives, more than Google or Bing or any search engine has ever been. But it's an extraordinary time to be in this industry.
It's fascinating.
I agree.
And job security for a lot of us.
We're not going anywhere.
That's right. I got asked the other day, when do you think the bubble's going to burst? I said, not in my lifetime.
There's no. I don't like to call it a bubble anymore, right? Well, look, we had the .com bubble, right? That burst. With the internet go away? No, we still have the internet, right? There's going to be market expansion and there's going to be market contraction. That's normal, right? But this, as a foundational piece of who we are and what we do, how we live, play, work, everything. This has become a piece of who we are as humanity.
It's awesome. Okay, so as I said in the introduction, you're the CEO of Apollo. So tell us give us a pitch on Apollo and what you're doing on the AI data center frontier.
It's been a fascinating journey for us. So at Apollo, we're building the AI services layer for modern data centers, where everyone is out there potentially trying to scramble to rent a GPU, but very few can actually orchestrate, monitor, and scale AI workloads for multi-tenant environments. So what Apollo does is that we work with co-locations, multi-tenant environments, not the ones that build for hyperscalers. That's not my target. The ones that have enterprise clients within their organizations. And we help them turn that architecture, a very captive audience, into what is a highly revenue generating AI service, AI model that ultimately insulates them from that bubble risk that we were just mentioning. Think of us as an operating system of the AI powered digital infrastructure economy. So if you have an idea, if you have a concept, you come to my factory floor to build that concept and idea. And especially if you're like a highly regulated organization, like a school, university, healthcare, banking, financial services, you come to me for a secure architecture, or U.S. government even, to build this stuff out. But beyond the environment and that software layer, that operating system layer, with all those tools that we have, we rekindle the childhood imagination of the executive, right? We ask and understand the realm of what's possible. We refuse to build an elephant on a unicycle. Rather, we go and say, what moves the needle for your business? This RFP process that's taking you 6 hours, let's see if we can get that down. A sales process that needs to be improved, a reduction in errors in your engineering systems. Heck, even a microphone that sits on mechanical equipment and is capable of understanding, hey, you know what, that generator started to make some weird sounds. You should send somebody out there because we think that in 2 hours you're going to experience a fault. These are just things that we've started to talk about with some of these others and what we're developing, but we're creating actual use cases, practical systems that support anyone from the supply chain industry, if you're curious about what this can do, to banking and healthcare, university systems, and so on. It's been a fascinating journey to be that platform layer that supports everything that's happening right now.
It sounds limitless, and it's your analogy of the imagination is great, because if you look at that cattle scenario, right, that application, think of the millions and that affects everyone in the world, the whole food chain, right? If you think about it. So it's amazing.
I wish we had time for all the crazy use cases that people are working on with us. Unfortunately, that's another hour conversation, but it really does spark people to ask questions of what's possible, what can this do for us? And one of my favorite processes in all these conversations is not actually the final product. It's the proof of concepts, where we use a sprinkle of their real data to create a sprinkle of a real life solution. Like, this is what it's going to look like. It's 10% of everything, but you get to play with it, touch it, feel it. And that, oh my gosh, Chrissy and everyone listening, that's my caffeine, the aha moment. Like, wow, this is what it can do. This is so neat. This is that moment where you're sitting in a boardroom and you say, we need to do AI. I don't know what that means, but then when you see it come to life, that's when you know and understand what it can do.
Lots of interesting things to come, I'm sure. So now we're going to a fun part, right? Which I didn't prep you for. So here we go. I call it Chrissy's hot seat.
Oh boy.
Okay. Where we look into some personal things, maybe not too personal, but get a real look at Bill Kleyman. Okay. So what's one quirky habit or hobby you've picked up outside the data center world that would surprise your colleagues and friends in the industry?
I am huge into baking sourdough bread.
Really?
Yeah, huge. I have a starter that is many, many years old, and I feed it with a flour called huturok, which is from Ukraine. And I've just recently been able to find it here in Chicago. They're starting to import it. So I have this really amazing, flavorful, it's actually funny, I just took it out of the fridge today to feed it, this wonderful starter. And I absolutely love making different kinds of rye and whole wheat sourdoughs. And my latest concoction is a croissant sourdough, which is actually my wife's absolute favorite. And I think anyone in this digital space needs to do something where you're disconnected. My sourdough bread does not have an IP address. There's nothing connected into it, right? It is my hands in dough and making it. The only thing I'll use is maybe my watch to set a timer to make sure I know when to mix it or when to turn the dough. But I love doing that kind of stuff. I probably bake at least 2 or 3 loaves a week. We consume at least 1 or 2 of those between my kid and my kids, my wife, and obviously I give away one to my parents and maybe our natty and whoever else will eat a loaf.
That's awesome. Does the starter have a name?
It doesn't. And I feel horrible because I go on these Reddit forums and people are like, just like absolutely wildly great names. I will name it, and I will be ready for the next podcast with a very cheesy, probably AI centered name or something. Maybe we'll make it a GCG poll, like help name Bill's.
I like that. Starter. Well, maybe we will do that. Probably come up with some clever things. All right. If you could have dinner with any tech visionary, living or dead, who would it be? And what's the one question you would ask them about the future of AI or data centers?
Wow.
That's a deep one.
No, it's a good one. So this person passed away in the 80s. She's one of my favorite people. Her name is Margaret Hamilton. So Maggie Hamilton, she's a computer scientist, and she's one of my favorite people that I've been following. She actually coined the term software engineer. And she began using that word to distinguish it from hardware engineering and other types of engineering specifically. And she led the development of the onboard flight software for NASA's, ready for this, Apollo guidance computer, right in the Apollo program, which
wow,
that's where we got her name. But she's extraordinary, and I would love, even right now, to go over and ask her, like, you coined this term, right? In the 60s and 70s, and you've seen what it has become. Like, how does that make you feel? Like, how do you envision the future of this becoming a part of, for example, like space travel? I love pioneers who have gotten the ability, who have received the ability to see something they pioneered just absolutely take off, right? Obviously asking Thomas Edison or Nikola Tesla, their original would be wonderful. But I think in the realm of what I do and in the space of someone who understands hardware systems and software systems, I would love to sit down with Margaret Hamilton and just have a lovely meal and ask her a whole bunch of questions.
Be an amazing interview.
I think so too.
Okay, what's the most memorable aha moment you've had in your career that completely shifted how you view the industry?
Wow,
you've had a few.
I know. And just everybody listening, these are definitely hot seat questions. I've never. I think my big aha moment, and I'm gonna have to give a shout out to my previous employer, Switch Data Centers, was when I first toured and I had a chance to start working with Rob Roy and Thomas Morton and Eddie Shooter back in the time when we were still there, and Missy Young, obviously these really, Heather Ellerby, who's their brilliant marketing individual as well. I had a chance to work with this group of individuals, and I think maybe for the first time, and I've been to many data centers, I've seen really cool supercomputing architectures. I saw just how beautiful these facilities are, and how creative architecturally they are, and the kind of extraordinary innovation that goes into these facilities. And that was my aha moment, to not just myself, but also to help people in the industry understand just how unique and special these facilities are. At Data Center World, I lead a Data Center 101 masterclass, and one of the sections is architecture. And I talk about like the Bahnhof computer systems data center, which is a former nuclear bunker in Europe, and it's straight up, Dr. Evil kind of a layer, or like the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, which is literally built into a 19th century church. Or back to my Switch example, the Switch Pyramid is literally a pyramid in Grand Rapids, Michigan, that was originally a steel case office. Steel case, they used to make really high-end furniture. And
Right.
Rob Roy's like, that's a cool building. And if that's not one of the neatest adaptive reuse architectures of a building, that is just so cool. And he goes out and he builds like a world-class data center out there. That I think that was one of my biggest aha moments is, I've been in the industry for a really long time. I've walked the halls through many data centers, and I think it was an eye-opening moment to just see just how neat and cool and organized and brilliant lights. And obviously it's Las Vegas, but they definitely mimic that kind of architecture, everywhere else. I'm gonna give them a big props and a shout out for, I think, helping me reimagine just how lovely and wonderful a data center could look.
Very cool. Okay, so if you could abandon tech for a year, which I don't think you could, and try a completely different profession, what would you do and why?
Be a lifeguard.
Really?
I didn't even have to think about that one. So I was a lifeguard. It was actually on my LinkedIn page. I was a lifeguard for 8.5 years. I competed. I won second place in state for spinal extrication. It was me and my team. We were able to get somebody on a board and stabilize. I think it was like in 23 seconds from the middle of a pool. It's pretty fast. I got a medal for it and everything. I don't know. I think that's what I would do. I would probably, manage people. We worked in a big enough pool that we were able to work with like firefighters. We had this really cool slide pool that actually had its own current. And so we would work with firefighters to do things like stabilization techniques in current water. So like spinal stabilization, because you can use the current to your advantage to help keep somebody afloat, or just getting them above a current, for example, or having swim out. And I loved it. I loved helping people. I loved saving lives. And to be perfectly honest, many of those life-saving capabilities that I learned, I keep up to date. And if I need to apply them, I still will. That was one of my favorite jobs in the world. I loved working with young people.
I think a lot of people will be surprised by that.
Yeah, it was literally one of my favorite jobs in the world, and specifically in a place where you're asking me like, what would I do if I would disconnect everything? I'd go be a lifeguard again because it was so much fun.
What's a piece of advice that you got early in your career that you still think about today, good or bad?
Oh, wow. There's a couple of that really ring out in my mind. When I was working for MTM Technologies, they were one of the largest Citrix VMware partners in the country. And I think I was a VP at the time, or maybe a director of information, of strategy. And Brian Coffey, who was the senior person in sales, SVP of sales, I think it was. Now he's with a different group, obviously. He's like, Bill, in your career, do your best to tie yourself to revenue as much as you can. And I was young and naive, and I didn't understand what that meant until I took over as CEO and co-founder of my company, and when I worked at Switch and so on. That you have so many roles, whether you're an engineer, marketing, whatever the case is, and if you can tie yourself to revenue of the company, bring value in that sense, you will, I don't want to say you'll have a golden ticket, but you will be seen as an invaluable piece of the team, because you are helping grow the business in one of the most important elements, and that's driving revenue. The other piece of advice, interestingly enough, MTM Technologies provided me an extraordinary amount of growth in my career. And this was a good piece of advice where I was in an executive meeting in Stamford, Connecticut, and Steve Stringer at the time was the CEO of MTM Technologies, and we were talking. It was a passionate conversation about sales, and here I am, kind of just like this, late 20s, early 30s dude, kind of sitting there listening along, and I'm like, let me chime in. I tried to chime in, and Steve Stringer looked at me, and in the kindest but most meaningful way says, Bill Kleyman, when the conversation is at this level, I need you to be just like that piece of furniture, quiet and still. And that was a moment for me that, I just need to sit quietly and listen and let these folks do what they need to do, because sometimes there's nothing to add and only everything to learn. That was a really good piece of advice. And I'm gonna give you one more, I promise. I know we're going way over time. When I worked for, and this is earlier in my career, Worldwide Fittings, one of the most amazing CEOs that I ever worked with, his name's Sean McCarthy. And Worldwide Fittings is a company, little pipe fittings and whatnot. Yeah. It's got their logo on here, WWF. I'm really proud of this little guy. It sits on here. And they created pipe fittings for like agricultural, for tanks, for space shuttles and whatnot. And I was their director of information technology. I had a chance to oversee 6 locations in the US, work with 2 in China and 1 in the UK. It was such an amazing experience building my own little data center. And the one thing that Sean made me do, especially when I started, is he made me walk the manufacturing floor. He made me sit at the CNC machines and lathe machines. He made me go and pick orders for like a week with the people in the warehouse, because he said, Bill, there's no way that you will be able to support my business and deploy the technology that I need unless you intimately understand every single process, from customer service down to where those order gets packed and shipped and sent off to the client. You're going to do every single one of those tasks. And by gosh, I spent 3.5 years in there. Even in my 3rd year, if I had a moment, I'd grab like a little zebra printer scanner, and I'd go out there and I'd pick a box. I'd pick an order. So I'm really proud that some of those folks, some of the agricultural machines out there, maybe a tank and the space shuttle or whatever it is, has parts and pieces packed by this guy. And that was an extraordinary moment to learn that you have to be in the trenches to learn the business intimately, so that when you're an executive, you can support it effectively.
Well, and just building out systems that support that technology, right? If you know exactly what it takes, that probably change the game quite a bit.
It helps you understand the user perspective so incredibly well that you build systems with them in mind. And that's the best kind of outcome. You create users that opt in to wanting to use your technology, which, circling back, that's how we're designing AI systems. That's all these use cases that I talked about earlier. We want people to use these tools and not be like, oh, this thing's gonna take my job, or it's just another tab I have to open. That's not what we're talking about.
Okay, only 2 more, and these are fun ones.
Go ahead.
What's the weirdest tech gadget that you've come across recently that you found fascinating?
Wow. The weirdest tech gadget? Okay, I've got an AI-powered bird feeder.
Wow.
That I absolutely love. And it's called Bird Buddy. And I was one of their original Kickstarters. And I actually got a second one because it is so incredibly neat. It identifies the bird. It actually now can identify individual birds that come to your little Bird Buddy house, whatever it is, feeder, multiple times, and it identifies them by their voice, even, and by their image. You could take videos and capture pictures that are super, super clear. And here's the kicker: that data is actually sent off to scientists to monitor the migratory patterns of both endangered and traditional bird species throughout different regions and places throughout the United States. That has been one of the weirdest yet coolest little AI technology. Bird Buddy. I absolutely love it. They have ones that are coming out for hummingbirds. We don't get that many here in Chicago, Illinois, but if you are in Wisconsin or somewhere where you've got some trees and flowers and nectar, get the hummingbird feeder, because holy cow, you get some really adorable pictures of these little tiny birds. They're flapping their wings so fast. There we go. That's got to be my favorite.
Okay. Last one. If you could put one message about the future of AI and data centers on a billboard for the world to see, what would it say?
Oh, wow.
I went deep today.
You did go deep. I love going back to, the oil analogy. We live in a world that just discovered oil, but hasn't invented the internal combustion engine. What does your engine look like? I literally would just put that up there, and like, it's such a basic example that I'd want people to think of what would your engine look like? Because obviously, when we did invent the internal combustion engine, right, you could have any Model T Ford as long as it was black, right? But say something like that right now, and you'd be laughed at right now. I'd hop in my Tesla and it's going to drive me on its own, right? The chasm that we've jumped in imagination, right? And I think a sub caveat to that would be nothing ever invented wasn't dreamed up first, right? And I think AI helps dreamers sort of rekindle that childhood sense of imagination, right? And learn to dream again, learn to imagine again because of what you can do. But honestly, I think a practical piece of verbiage that I would put in a AI colon, we've discovered oil, don't know what the engine looks like. What does your engine look like? I mean, that's a commercial for Apollo in itself, but I think that would be my biggest challenge. And pardon the crude analogy. See what I did there? Because it's oil. Oh gosh, I've got a 7-year-old. I'm allowed to make dad jokes. She's really good at rolling her eyes. I want everyone to sort of think about that, right? And again, like the equivalent of lighting it on fire or the gas station is ChatGPT. And can you imagine just how little of the surface that we've scratched in terms of what we can do with this? And drawing back to that parallel, I mean, listen, oil is used in clothing, in medicine, in food, and in everything, right? And obviously it has its positives, clearly. And it has very much its negatives. I am not drawing a direct parallel between AI and oil, obviously, but it will have its extraordinary positives, and I believe it's going to have some challenges and setbacks that we talked about as well. But honestly, at the very core of it is AI is a thing for you to build and construct that fundamentally impacts your life, your business. What does that engine look like?
Mic drop.
No, this mic is expensive. I'm going to keep hearing it.
Yeah, mine's heavy. All right. Well, we're going to end it there. And thank you so much. I think this has been fascinating and educational and very interesting. And we learned some very unique things about you, my friend. So when I come, I want some bread.
Well, we're gonna make it happen. I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate everything that we've talked about. I really believe that we're not experiencing an evolution; it's a reinvention. And those who move fastest and embrace bold infrastructure, who reimagine what's possible, you're not just going to survive this shift. You're going to define it, and you're going to thrive in it. That's just the base. Don't be afraid of it. Go out there and do something with it.
An infrastructure renaissance.
I agree. 100%.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. Thanks, everyone.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. And a huge thank you to today's speaker. It was a pleasure having you. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and follow. Until next time.